All right, welcome on in, everybody, to the very first episode of the Stamp of Approval podcast. This is a new idea that I'm going to be running with. I don't have any catchy slogans, no fancy slogans like No Jumper or any other podcast right now. But what I do have is a fancy lower third. And there it is. Shout outs to Blockbuster John for not only the idea, but also the logo idea. I am also working with an independent artist to get some newer logos depending on what topic we discuss. But a couple things I just kind of wanted to run through in the beginning. The first thing I want to talk about here is kind of my goals for the show and also the outline and formatting for guests. I'm going to be, as far as recording as well, first of all, I'm going to be recording an audio-only version through Audacity, and I'm also going to be recording the video version, which you see here through OBS. In the future, we might, introduce some other ways, but I'm going to try to make some socials and probably just keep the socials mine for now until we, potentially introduce a co-host down the line if somebody's really interested in doing that. But for the time being, I'm going to be recording it audio-wise and uploading it to Apple, Spotify, basically wherever anybody gets, wherever anybody gets their podcast, that's where I want to try to upload this. So if you want to watch the video, that'll be uploaded on my YouTube channel. If you want to listen, if you're out running, driving, whatever, you have that option as well. Now, today especially, as the title says, a reintroduction, I mainly want to talk about just a quick, overview of kind of how I got here in terms of why I stream like a degenerate, why I'm so obsessed with Silent Hill, a few of the burning questions that my chat has had for me for quite a long time and I've never really gotten into. Every time I usually say, well, this is a pretty long story, I don't want to get into it. Well, we're going to get into it because we've got all the time in the world, you and me. That's right, you. So, outside of that, I want to kind of settle on sort of a 90-minute to 2-hour runtime here. I don't really want to spend too much longer than that. I feel like if we were to pass the 2-hour mark, depending on the topic, it can start to, feel like it's repeating itself, getting a little bit dry. So we'll try to keep things fresh. Without further ado, let's get started. So, quick life story. And again, this feels like a job interview, having to go through my whole history, but we won't go through things in that much detail. Basically, I had a really great childhood because the environment that I grew up in was very low money and really great parents. They were very involved in my hobbies from an early age. And yes, some of those did include video games. But, just in general, we never really had a lot of money. And I feel like that's super crucial because you definitely learn the value of it. I've definitely encountered some people in my life who grew up with a ton of expendable income. And the main thing that I've noticed about them is they don't really understand the value of money. And they also don't understand the value of other people's time and also their effort. So, I'm glad that happened. When I was super, super young, we did have a lot of money because my dad actually ran his own car repair shop. He was a small business owner. And, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 1999, 2000, from at least my memory, at least, now I was super young at the time, he basically ended up with a degenerative back issue that prevented him from being able to work. So my mom started working and, of course, our income dropped precipitously. And that's just kind of how things were. No sob stories here, just kind of, telling you how it is. So from there, we were actually doing homeschool. I swear we had to have been like the only people in the tri-state area because we were living in the South at the time doing homeschool. And I forget exactly how it worked, but basically we would get these books of like language arts, history, and science. They would come through the mail and we would go through the different material and we would take the tests and everything like that. And then basically that would place us where we needed to be placed as far as the state curriculum and, whatever other parameters there were. Well, my mom was basically our teacher. So when she had to start working and my dad had his health issues going on, they made the decision to put us in public school. And I always remember this because it sticks out pretty strongly in my mind. I remember going into the grade school that we were going to enter. I was supposed to go to 3rd grade. My brother was supposed to go to 4th grade. And they were extremely smug about it. They thought we were just, hillbillies. They thought that we were just morons. We didn't know any material. So they kind of, in a smug way, they're like, oh, we'll have them test and then we'll decide where to put them. So long story short, we took the test, obliterated it. And then all of a sudden their tone changed. They're like, "Oh yes, we'd love to have them here." And my parents were like, "Oh, well, that's a pretty big change. What happened?" So they told them that we tested well. So instead of going into third grade, I did third grade for about a day and a half before I took the test. Don't worry about it. I did third grade for about a day and a half until I took that test, and then a member of staff basically came in and like just was like, "Hey, come here." They told me to grab my stuff, and they took me out of that room and walked me right next door to the fourth grade room. And they're like, "You know the material for third grade. You don't need to be here, so go ahead and go to fourth grade." So I did that. The primary issue with that was that I was always the youngest person. And as I'm sure you guys know, being the youngest or the oldest person, but much more so the youngest in your grade throughout school, is like subject to bullying. People love to shit talk you because, everybody else is getting their permits, they're getting their licenses, everything like that. And of course, I'm just sat there like, "Oh, I have to wait another 7, 8 months before I can do that," but whatever. So anyway, that's kind of the story of how that went. So when I graduated high school, I thought it was a good decision to jump straight into college. I'm like, "Oh, I'm only 17. Most of my other friends are 18. I'll just jump straight to college, get a big head start on that. I'll have a 4-year degree by the time I'm 21. Well, here I am at age 28 and I don't have a degree. So what happened? Well, long story short, stupidity. But basically, I had been attending, my local college for about 4 or 5 months. I had done about a semester and a half. Ended up being obsessed with some girl. Long story short, I started skipping classes because I wanted to go hang out with her. A very stupid, series of decisions. Well, something I found out about very quickly is if you skip enough classes, they'll place you in something called academic probation. And we had to go to this big meeting that was after hours. It's like 6 p.m. And it was basically in the central building of the whole university. And it was a bunch of people that were like throwing spitballs at each other and like literally just the degenerates. Appreciate that, Meg. And I was like, holy shit, I'm in here with these people. Like, and I'm not trying to act elitist, but it was just a weird feeling like, man, I messed up enough that I have to come to this meeting and like be lectured about how my school performance is really bad. So I made the decision to fix it. My university had a really weird policy, which I don't know if a lot of other universities have, but basically if you do bad enough in a semester, I just remember the lady that was kind of my academic council person. I don't remember what her official title was, but she was basically the person who I was supposed to meet with once a week about my progress. They had something where if a semester was so bad, you could basically have it stricken from the record. They would still charge you for it, of course, but you could basically have it completely removed off your record, and they just wouldn't consider that as a legitimate semester anymore. So I'm like, okay, it was bad enough. It's tougher to recover from this. Let's just eliminate that. Let's just get it out of here. So after that happened, my GPA went back up to where it was supposed to be. And I started doing a work study, which was a help desk, where we would basically take university issued laptops. We would work on them, replace displays, keyboards, trackpads, different things like that. They were pretty old and pretty frail, just like business grade Dell model laptop, nothing special. So I did that for a few months, and now summer's coming up because it's the end of the spring semester. And I just remember going in one day and I thought to myself, this isn't what I want to do in life. I sat down and I signed into our work software where we could submit work orders and different things. My boss was right behind me. And I just had this like moment of clarity where I was like, this isn't what I want to do in life. I don't want to go to school right now. I need to take a break. I want to just go into the workforce and start working. So I knock on my boss's door. We had a really long conversation about it. And she basically said, well, I've got a job opportunity for you over the summer. So why don't you stick it out, work here over the summer and then make your decision. So I'm like, okay, that sounds good. Yes, help desk like IT. And so I did that. Basically, the summer job was just going to different computer labs on campus, replacing the Ethernet runs, replacing the peripherals, the desktops, the monitors, all these different things. I did that for about 2 weeks, but I had already spoken to the administration of the university, letting them know that I would not be coming back after the summer. I basically let them know officially that, I'm going to do this job and then I'm done. Well, I didn't realize that you're not allowed to be employed by the university in student work if you don't plan to continue being a student. I don't know how that works at other universities, but that's how it worked at mine. So I'm just sitting there at the desk and some person comes in and just hands me a letter. They're like, yeah, you're going to want to, read this. We can't continue your employment. So it's got your last paycheck in it and this, that, and the other. So basically, I went around to everybody. There was only a skeleton crew. So I went around to everybody. I'm like, I guess I'll see you guys later. I don't know when I'll see you, but I guess, kind of just said the goodbyes for now and headed out the door. And I tell you, when I got in my car, I had this the only way I can describe it is a very intoxicating feeling where I thought to myself, like I had this sense of freedom. Some people, they stay in school for a really long time, like up until their very late 20s. And some people try to get out of school as quickly as possible. I just learned the hard way that I'm not someone who wanted to live the majority of my early 20s and late teens, still in school, still taking classes, still being beholden to like submitting classwork and taking tests. I know some people love it, but I hated it. And so, I got in the car and I just had this really intoxicating feeling like, wow, my life as an adult can actually start now. I can go out and do whatever I want to do. I'm not beholden to a professor. I don't have to submit work on this online software that we had, whatever. Basically that's how that went. And I got a job in retail very quick, but before that happened, let me actually mention something. Yeah, 100% back. Let me actually mention something really quick is when I first got home that day, I said to myself, I want to try to make streaming work because I had done some like test streams. Basically, long story short, my brother went into the Army and he left for the time a decent computer behind. This was like 2011. So he left a computer that had an i5 2400 and a GTX 560 Ti with 4 gigs of RAM. So this was like mid-range PC even for the time. So I had started doing some streams, but the only game that I could really stream was Silent Hill 3. And I just remember being super nervous when I would turn the camera on, just like glancing over, just paranoia, glancing over at the chat. Because back then, they didn't even have a game browser yet when I started. And many times when I was live, I was the only person streaming Silent Hill 3. I would get people in my chat constantly saying like, dude, you're the only person that plays these games. Where are all the Silent Hill players at? I'm like, I don't know. Back then, Ustream was a legit competition. Maybe they're on Ustream. I don't know. But anyways, so I did that. This is now spring of 2013 that I started. So I pretty much was streaming 3 to 4 times a day. Or not 3 to 4 times a day. I was streaming 3 to 4 times a week. And the only game that I could really stream with any regularity was Silent Hill 3. I used some of the last money from my last paycheck to buy a Dazzle DVC 100. And if you guys don't know what that is, it's basically an analog capture device that only captures composite and S video. A lot of early YouTube, people were using Dazzles to capture gameplay footage. So I'm sure a lot of people, if you're familiar with content creation, you've heard of the thing before. So I could capture, Silent Hill 2 and 4 on PS2, and then Silent Hill 3 I would play on PC. And I basically did that. I just obsessively played, those 3 games for months and months and months. And then October of 2013 rolled around, and Dan's Gaming was doing his Halloween marathon, and he just so happened to be playing Silent Hill 3. I did not coordinate this. I did not plan this at all. He just so happened to be playing Silent Hill 3 the same night that I was playing Silent Hill 3. And he was much earlier in the game than I was. So someone basically popped in and was like, hey, you're way further in the game. I need to see what happens because I got to go soon. And Dan is like way back here. Well, I keep glancing over because back then you just had to look at your live viewer numbers and it just keeps climbing. It's like 30, 40, 50, 60. And I ended up at like 145 viewers, all runoff of Dan's Gaming that were trying to see like the end of the game. And so I was like, holy shit, like I could barely get a word out. I was freaking out because I was like, this is crazy. Like back then, that's what you needed to get partner, was averaging those type of numbers. Well, I had that stream and I kept the momentum going for another couple weeks, but you got to keep in mind, I had been basically doing nothing, sitting around from April of 2013 until October Okay, so a good 6 months of no job applications, nothing, just trying to make streaming work to the best of my ability. Well, my parents were fed up with it, and they basically gave me an ultimatum. They said, you're either going to have to get a job, a real job, because they didn't consider Twitch like a viable option, and I can totally understand why, or you're just going to have to leave. So I was like, all right, I'll stop the streaming thing and I'll try to get a job. So I got a job in retail, and because it was an overnight position, it pretty much conflicted with the schedule that I used to be streaming in, and I had to drop streaming entirely. So I had some decent momentum building, and there's a part of me that says, I could have been a partner all those years ago, sure, but I think if I were to have done it at that time, I would have had such little social experience that it actually would have been a detriment, and I'm glad that it didn't happen. Nowadays, when I think back on it, I'm glad that it didn't happen. But long story short, I got a job in retail, did that for about 3.5 years. I met Bridget at that job, which is by far the best thing that happened, but it just was a very dead-end job. They did their best to try and keep you from being able to move positions. They wanted to keep you in one spot for ages, and it was just tough to get noticed because all the upper management was working on days, and they frankly didn't know who the hell we were. So did that for about 3.5 years. As the 4th year was coming by, I had the same feeling that I had in college of just like, this is not what I want to do with my 20s. I don't want to just work this single retail job until I'm pushing 30. So something has to change. Well, I had a friend who was coming out of the Air Force. He's actually a mod in my channel, Iron Tusk. And he was like, hey, you and your girlfriend need a place to stay. I'm going to be moving to this bigger city in the same state. Why don't we just become roommates and we'll try to make it work? So we did that. 2019 was when we moved, and 2019 was also easily the worst year of my life. And it had nothing to do with Bridget or Tusk or anybody. It had all to do with finances. So there were some issues transferring positions like we wanted to initially, so we just decided to quit. We had no options but to quit. And it was just a really bad time because I would have to constantly put in job applications and just hear nothing back. So I would just kind of sit around all day hoping that I would, not burn through my savings before we could get something set up. Eventually, I got another IT job at another university, and the pay was awful because it was supposed to be yet another student employment position. But unlike the previous university, you could work there without being a student and it wasn't an issue. So I was able to work there, but the pay was structured in a way that it was meant for a student who had their food and their room paid for by the university. So the pay was very low. So that's where I had to supplement that income and start doing transcription on the side on a website called Rev. No, not sponsored in any way whatsoever. It's just something I used to do. I haven't logged into that site in well over 3-4 years. So just saying, but it did help me, at the time because we really did need it. Now, I've told this story before. At that second IT job, I'm just going to give the Spark Notes version now because I've told it many times on the stream, but I'm going to tell it for the podcast's sake. Dishonest bosses are something that I cannot stand. If you're going to be my direct supervisor, the least that I ask of you is just to be honest with me and not, string me along. And that's exactly what happened at that university job. They kind of noticed that I had a lot of experience and I had worked in IT position before and I was used to the ticketing software, this, that, or the other. So they basically told me that if I were to take on a lot of tier 2 responsibilities, they would be 100% willing to give me a tier 2 spot somewhere down the line. And this was a full-time position with benefits, with much better pay, with just all these awesome benefits. I'm like, yes, let's do this. So I committed every single day. I committed to learning as much as I possibly could. I stuck to the person. They basically let me share an office with somebody else. And I stuck to them like glue. I learned everything I could possibly learn. Two months goes by. 3 months goes by. I'm like, well, that's, it's about right. 3 months to get acclimated before I'm ready for a position. That's about right. And I kind of mentioned it in passing, like in a jokey way. But he, that boss that told me that the position would be available is kind of just being standoffish. He doesn't want to talk about it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. 4 months goes by. I hear nothing. 5 months goes by. And at the beginning of the 6th month, I'm like, okay, something is not right here. Because I was told 6 months ago that this was the plan. Nobody's communicating what's going on. So I just kind of go into his office unannounced and I'm like, hey, can we talk for a second? And I ask him, what happened to that position? You told me way back when that, there was going to be a tier 2 position. And he basically blows me off and he says, oh, we'll talk about that later. Now, keep in mind, I had been told we'll talk about that later every single time I brought it up for the past 6 months. So I wasn't having it. I went straight to, in the same building, there was actually the office of the executive director of IT for the whole university. So I go in her office and I'm like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I ask her the same question. And she goes, do you want me to be honest? I said, absolutely. That's all I'm asking for is honesty. She said, there is no position and we don't have any plans to open one up. So, equipped with that information, I immediately said, this is not a place where I want to continue working. They have strung me along now for 6 months, promising me something that doesn't exist. And I just frankly felt like I had been cheated. So I immediately was back to the same routine that I was at in the beginning of that year, which is putting in job applications everywhere I possibly could. And again, not hearing anything back. I would get phone calls, but, they were kind of like preliminary. And when they would ask me the questions, they would be all these things that like, I just had no idea about. I mean, there was like a law firm that I applied at and they were asking me about all these crazy custom, systems. They basically needed like a project manager. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, I don't have the experience for that. So I'm just putting in. And I've kind of basically given up. I'm like, look, I've spent all day, every day putting in job applications for 3 weeks. I did not walk off. I waited until I had another position lined up and put my 2 weeks in. But so I go home. I'm the only person in the apartment and I just have this feeling of dread. Like, man, 3 straight weeks. Like, I don't know how much longer I can continue to put in job applications. Like, this is just never going to happen. And I'm sitting there and I get a phone call and it is, it's just the most amazing opportunity I've ever been given. And it's the perfect position for me. The preliminary phone interview went amazing. I just had this awesome conversation with one of the recruiters and I just remember once I got off the phone, I just immediately felt happy. And I just thought, wow, that went super well. And I just had no doubts in my mind that it was going to work out. And then right after I got on the phone, I had given them some contact information. They requested, if they were able to send me some stuff within 6 hours before even midnight that night. We're talking like 7, 8 p.m. I get an email saying, hey, come to this place. We'll do this interview. And I find out the interview is like 10 minutes away from me. So I was like, fuck yeah, let's do this. So, I put on my business casual, which I had not had to do in several years. And I went and I did the interview. And again, it immediately felt like this is where I'm supposed to be. Had a great conversation. And basically before I left, they had me sit down and work with someone who had been there for a couple of years just to kind of give me a feel for how this position was going to work. And it was another sort of, support center, call center type operational job. And it just went super well. I felt immediately at home. And I remember on the way out, because they basically had to walk me out of the building, they're like, so how do you feel? And I told them, I was like, in all honesty, I feel amazing. Like, I can't wait to get started. That's what I said. And I got home. As soon as I got home, they sent me the offer. So that basically put me on the path to where I am today as far as my career. Not at that same company anymore, but that put me on the path that I am currently on in my career. That's been nothing but, growth ever since. So it ended up working out. 2019 was an awful year, but at the end of the day, I'm thankful for that year because, my dad always says that the worst times build character, and he's 100% right. Like, I never want to go back to that. And that's kind of something that I always consider when I make decisions nowadays as far as my career. So now, as far as that basically covers, the whole life story bit. I don't want to rant and ramble any further. I think we've talked about it at length, more than enough. So that brings me to what attracted me to streaming. And I guess I should probably answer about recently, which would be late 2019. Long story short, boredom and just really missing that feeling. Playing video games by yourself on your PC is fun, but only to a certain point. And sharing it with a community especially, or just sharing it with some people that really enjoy the same things that you enjoy, I feel like is an invaluable experience, especially Leaf, Stick, and Zero out of my life story now. So I will mention that. But basically, I got this Christmas bonus late 2019. I'm like, what do I do with this? So, I'm just going back through my old clips and I'm like, you know what? I miss that feeling of just being live and talking about Silent Hill and other horror games with people. I want to get some stream equipment and I want to get back to it. And the way that my brain works is if I invest a decent amount of money into something, I'm going to feel just by default more motivated to do it. So I picked up, the mic, the mixer, all the equipment that I needed, and basically was off to the races from there. Now, the quality has improved a ton since those days, but it's been something that I've just kind of incorporated into my daily routine ever since. Someone in my chat is asking me to mention my 2 cats. Yes, I adopted a Torby, who is a tortoiseshell tabby mix. I adopted her in August of 2020. And then we have another ragdoll cat who showed up at my parents' place, and we eventually adopted him because my mom was going to take him to a shelter, and I said, hell no, you're not doing that. So basically, that's the long and short of it, sort of how I got here, why I stream as often as I do. I feel like I honestly, these days, I don't even play video games if I'm not streaming. The motivation to want to play a video game without having the stream running is gone. I mean, it has disappeared. And it's not that I don't enjoy it anymore. It's just that, I always have that nagging feeling of like, why wouldn't I just turn on the stream if I'm going to play this? Why wouldn't I? So that's something that, that's something that a lot of streamers, I'm sure, deal with, where, it's tougher to find the motivation to play games with yourself, to play just by yourself, or maybe in a personal friend Discord or whatever it happens to be. But with that being said, I kind of want to talk about something else, which is a lot of times in my stream, we sort of jokingly mention my brother. And I kind of left him out of a lot of the stories for good reason, because this deserves its own chapter. If you were chapter skipping through a Blu-ray or a DVD, this deserves its own. I don't want to mix this in with anything else. And really what it comes down to, and again, this is no sob story, but really what it comes down to is I've never really had a solid relationship with my brother. I understand that that's not ordinary. I understand that that's not the norm. But that's just how it's always been. We've always been so different in our interests, in what our goals are, in even the girls that we date. I mean, we've been so opposite in almost everything in life that it's difficult for us to find any common ground anywhere. But basically, my brother and I, when we were in high school, we both did speech and debate. We were on the same team. And my parents and I started noticing that for one reason or another, he would just start lying about virtually everything. Now, I had a phase with this too when I was 14 or 15-ish, and I think every kid, has a phase where you lie about a lot of stuff, but I got punished severely. I got grounded frequently for lying. But they would always use my brother as kind of the example of how I should behave, so he never got punished. They were kind of using me as an example, and he would never get punished. So I feel like, mentally he just kind of developed this thing of, well, I can get away with anything. And that's exactly how he behaved when he was in like his junior and senior year of high school. We started to notice, just some really dishonest stuff. He would tell me one thing, he would tell my parents one thing, he would tell the people at school one thing, and they would all be vastly different. And if you called him on it, he would just, say, you're misremembering or you're crazy. And it got to the point where my dad was so suspicious of everything he would tell him that he would force my brother to write it down by hand. That way, if he tried to change the story later, he could say, but wait, this is what you wrote earlier. Why did you change it? And even then, he would still get caught lying. He's just one of those people that seemingly can't get a sentence out without lying. And it's very bizarre behavior. It's lying about things that have no bearing. I would just ask him a simple question of like, hey, did you do this or did you do that? Has no, just basic chore type stuff. And he would lie about it. He's like, yeah, I did that. Like, hey, did you do the dishes? Yeah, I did that. I go in the kitchen, they're not done. It's like, why are you lying about this? It brings up so many like behavioral questions, but I'm not here to psychoanalyze anybody. Point being, in 2011 or so, that ceased to be an issue because he joined the army. He came back in 2015 He did a solid 4 years there. I'm not going to get into the details of why he was no longer in the Army, because that's not really something I want to get into. But long story short, he was no different after coming back. In fact, I think he was actually worse, because he had gotten hurt while he was in the Army, and they had prescribed him Percocet. And when he got home, I had noticed that, he was blowing through his prescription pretty quick. And I really didn't like how he behaved when he was on it. Now, he genuinely probably needed it, but as you guys know, with opioids, people tend to act very bizarre when they're on it. So, to my knowledge, like me personally, I don't know for sure if he was addicted to that. But again, that's not really the topic of it. I just knew that he was insufferable when he was taking it, so I didn't want to be around him. Now, I can also get into pretty much the ultimatum that happened. So there were two gigantic moments that really severed any chance of us having a relationship. The first one happened when a girl that he was dating after getting back from the Army dumped him and kicked him out. He had nowhere to go. The only place he had to go was my apartment and Bridget's apartment. So we were forced to take him in because, look, even if I don't have a relationship with you, I'm never going to just say, yeah, just stay out on the streets. Like, it's just not me. I'm never going to be that petty about it. If you really badly need a place to stay, you can stay here. But I had to lay down some ground rules because we had lived together in the past when he first came out of the Army, and he was really dishonest about bills. He was really dishonest about rent. He would frequently tell me, well, it's okay if the internet gets shut off for a few days. It's okay if they turn off the electricity just for a morning or so before I can go pay it. Like just really bizarre stuff that doesn't work at all. So, I kind of laid down some ground rules. I'm like, cool. Yeah, you can live with us if you make sure you maintain a job and don't quit like you did last time. If you make sure you pay your bills on time, if you make sure you always have your part of everything ready. And he's like, oh, of course, I'm not going to screw this up. I'm not going to screw this up at all. It took maybe a month and a half. The first month was okay. He was a little bit awkward, and he didn't want to talk very much. But then after that, it went. Again, we had to have our rent ready as cash. He would steal $20, sometimes $40 off the top and pretend that he had no idea how it happened, despite us counting the money up several times. Just some very conniving, stupid things, in all honesty. And he would be extremely petty about stuff. Like, we would ask him to take the trash out, which I think is a fairly sensible thing to ask of any roommate, especially when they're contributing to it. He would come home, pick up a bunch of the trash off the top of like the main trash can that all of us were using, and he would put the bag in his room and use that as an excuse as to why he didn't need to take it because it wasn't full on. Just really weird stuff that I personally can't even explain. Really bizarre stuff. He would always leave the bathroom a wreck. He would always decide to take a shower randomly right as we needed to be taking showers to get ready for work. Just, horrible roommate behavior. And so after a couple months of that, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. So we sit him down. We're like, dude, you got to find somewhere else to live. This is not going to work. And of course he plays the sob story of he goes to all of his friends and he's like, oh, he's kicking me out. My brother just hates me. He's doing this completely out of nowhere, and he's overreacting, and these, just bullshitting to his friends, basically. The way that my brother works is if he's ever criticized or called out on anything, he immediately runs to all of his friends for validation. He's like, can you believe that my brother would do this to me? Oh my God. He needs validation instantly. And that's kind of what he did. And he actually successfully convinced some of our friends that I was doing that. And they were messaging me like, man, how could you do this? And I had to tell them the story. I had to tell them what was going on, because I'm like, I wouldn't do this if I didn't have a good reason. Well, embarrassingly enough, his ex-girlfriend ended up moving into a house with 7 or 8 different people, and he had to move in with them. So he got a tiny little room, and there was 7 or 8 other people living in the house, including his ex-girlfriend. So, at that point I was so fed up with him. I was like, we don't talk anymore. He was trying to talk to me. He was trying to give me a hug before he left. I'm like, dude, just don't. I was so fed up with him. I've always had really good ability to manage my anger, but that night in particular, as he was moving his stuff out, I could have just broken his jaw. I could have, that's how pissed off I was. So I just had to keep my emotions in check. I'm like, dude, just get out of here. Let's not try to, don't extend this any further than it needs to. Just get out of here. So, yeah, that's a good question. Why didn't one of the friends take him in? But anyways, because he had tried living with him in the past and they also knew he was a terrible roommate. So anyways, we kind of went our separate ways. And around when he moved out, we lived at that apartment for another year or so before the whole, quitting our retail jobs and moving to the bigger city with Tusk happened. So it was around January 2020. He had been invited to a friend Discord that we had, just a personal, Discord with some friends in it. And he would always avoid going in it when I was in there. Well, one night he actually didn't do it, and we just ended up talking. We didn't talk to each other. We just talked kind of within the conversation of the rest of our friends. And then he DM'd me after that and said, "Hey, if you're okay with talking again, I'm cool with it." We apologized about what happened, and we started talking again. Well, I'm never too prideful to admit when I'm wrong. And Bridget told me immediately, "This is a mistake. You've gone through this cycle before. You shouldn't talk to him." But for some unexplainable reason, I did it anyway. Okay. So I start talking to him again. And I notice very quickly that he hasn't changed. He's telling all these really weird, embellished stories. This is another thing that he loves to do. He's telling me these stories about how he's doing stage performance as like his major at a new university now that's not very close to where I was living. And he's telling me stories about how the directors are literally fighting each other for the chance to cast him. And I have the text to prove it, but that's whatever. It's just hilarious to look at. He's like, "Oh, they were fighting over me." And in parentheses, he goes, "And it was very fierce." Why would you send me that? It's complete horseshit. So I noticed, very quickly that his whole embellishing and just making up false stories hasn't changed. And I'm like, well, maybe, once we start talking a little bit more, maybe that'll sort of go away. So long story short, it didn't. And it just continued to get worse. I don't know how much detail I can get into, but let's just say for whatever reason that we still, our entire, my immediate family cannot wrap our heads around. He decided to, with a bunch of people in our hometown, he decided to tell them that my parents and me were involved in things that we absolutely weren't involved in regarding like conspiracy theories and stuff. And so and it just seemed to be completely out of nowhere. He tried to just destroy, my whole family's reputation. We have no idea why he did this. It seemed to be completely out of nowhere, and we still don't know to this day why he did it. But, he kind of saw sense and was starting to be like, "Yeah, that was messed up." But, he had already done enough damage that our whole family was like, you're dead to us. Like it was very bad. And again, I'm not getting into the details. But let's just say the accusations he was making were very serious, not necessarily against me. Luckily enough, me and him were talking at the time, so he mostly left me out of it. But it was just baffling, the stuff that he was completely falsifying. And I remember I messaged him and I'm like, "Hey, are we ever going to talk about this?" And he basically had decided that it was best that we don't talk about it. And that was the day where I'm like, "You know what? Don't contact me anymore. That's it. We don't talk ever again. You're dead to me as well." And that was October 2021, so about 2 years ago now. Yeah. Or September 2021 is when that happened. So I don't know where his head is at. I don't know if he's ever going to wake up to reality, but he's under this delusional idea that he is a prodigy of an actor. And this was kind of one of the things that really, ruined, quote unquote, in his mind, ruined our relationship. Is he showed me this reel that he had put together of these local movies that he was a part of. And he's like, "What do you think? Be honest." And I said, "Well, if you're leaving it up to me and you want me to be honest, this is terrible. There's no way that you'll get a major role with this, this acting ability in these clips. I'm just being honest. You asked me to be honest. I'm saying this because if I were to show somebody this, I would want to know." And he called me an abuser. He sends me this big long email. He's like, "You are my abuser and you're trying to put me down." It's just, he's one of those people that your energy is so much better spent with other things in your life. And ever since he's not been in my life, it has been such a relief to not have to worry about whatever nonsense he's up to. There's other stories, of course, and other very conniving and just bizarre things that he would do. Like, for example, we went over to Christmas one time because, we were all just kind of in town and we decided, hey, let's get together at my brother's place and we'll celebrate Christmas, open presents or whatever. And I get there, and this was right after he had decided to quit school and make a film. He had decided just all of a sudden that he was qualified enough to quit school and make a movie. So we go in and he's playing on this 3DS. It's like the Galaxy 3DS. It was brand new at the time, or very new. And he's playing some game on it. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Where'd you get that? And because he had quit school and quit his job, he was very self-conscious about where he spent his money. So I guess he thought I was trying to interrogate him. And he said, oh, I actually won this on a giveaway. I didn't spend any money on this. So I checked the Amazon account. We were sharing an Amazon account at the time. He had purchased it. The last 4 digits of his card number were right there in plain English. And he purchased it, put up all the money for it. I'm like, then why does it show here? And he's like, oh, actually, that was a one-time use card that I won from a giveaway. And so I'm just like baffled at this point. I'm like, how far is he going to take this lie? I just need to know how long he's going to commit to this. And so I say, okay, where's the giveaway? And he said, oh, it was a Twitch stream. And immediately I'm like, okay, so this is kind of the hook. Where's the line in the sinker? So I said, okay, what's the name of the Twitch stream? Because I want to win something too if they're giving 3DSs away like this. And he goes, oh, actually, it was a pop-up Twitch stream. Meaning they did one stream for this particular giveaway and then they shut the channel down forever. And I'm like, oh, well, that's convenient. Just weird stuff. When something is plain as day, and even when presented with black and white evidence, catching him red-handed in anything, he just morphs this weird snowball of a lie into such ludicrous nonsense that none of us there, like, we honestly didn't push it any further because we're all just looking at each other like, what is going on? Like, is he really saying this shit? Is this coming out of his mouth? Well, eventually, after we left that day, I kind of dropped it while we were there. But after we left that day, I'm like, dude, why don't you just admit things sometimes? Like, why did you lie about this? And I just straight up used the words, why did you lie? And he knew that he couldn't lie any further. And then the strategy that he goes with is to make you feel guilty for criticizing him. So he started to say, well, I guess I'm just a useless piece of shit. I'm just worthless garbage. Just filling the chat thread with all this stuff to try to make me feel guilty about it. I can't even begin to get into how many other times those types of things happened. And it was over the most absurd nonsense. And he also would do this thing where if he needed to be there at a certain time for like a family gathering, or if you needed a ride from him or something like that, he would pretend that he needed to go to either a therapy appointment or something else. And his proof that he needed to go there was that he set a reminder on his phone. So he would send me, he would send Tusk, he would send all of our family screenshots on his phone of a reminder that he had set that said, oh, therapy appointment at this time, can't do it. It's like, dude, you created this. You could have just created this out of nowhere. How is that proof? That's what your mom does too, yeah. And it's just very bizarre behavior. And so, one time, basically what it came down to was we had come to the conclusion that he may not even be in therapy. He never once talked about his therapist any further than just saying my therapist. And we even got some mail from the place that he was allegedly going to asking him if he wanted to begin therapy there. So all of the anecdotal evidence pointed to the fact that he wasn't even in therapy, but he was claiming that he was. And that kind of gets into another topic that I just wanted to cover really quick. Do you guys have those friends who just seemingly are always, always, always in therapy? And they will stay in therapy for months at a time, if not years. Like my brother, for example, claims to have now been in therapy for over 8 years. And one of the last times I saw him in person, we were all at another Christmas get together in another, where my parents live, so a whole nother town. And my dad finally got fed up with it because he just kept talking about my therapist and I have been discussing this, my therapist and I, this, that, or the other. And my dad goes, so you've been going to this therapist for this many years and you haven't changed at all? He's like, well, you need to get your money back because obviously something's not working out. And you know what? I have to agree. I mean, if you are going to therapy with the intention to make meaningful change in your life, and you go year in and year out, and to everyone in your inner circle, you don't exhibit any change whatsoever, who is the problem at that point? I mean, you don't. And his big thing was, he's like, I've learned to apologize. It's like, well, apologies don't do shit, man. You need to apologize and then make meaningful change. You know, he's trying to apologize to me about stealing rent money and all this other stuff. It's like, that's cool. But if you changing, your actions would mean a lot more to me than your fucking words, man. Your words don't mean anything anymore. You've lost that with all of us, you know? But anyways, that's basically all I had to say on that topic. You know, when it comes to my brother, kind of how I got here. And that's sort of the whole topic of this episode, is a reintroduction. So at this point, I do kind of want to open it up just to some questions. If you guys wanted me to ask, or if you guys wanted to ask me a few things about it, I'm going to go ahead and get chat back up on screen here. So if you guys wanted to ask me a few things about that whole spiel that I just went through, about streaming, anything else, feel free to ask me. And I also, you know, was kind of reading chat the whole time as well. But basically, you know, what it comes down to is, you know, streaming has been a very fulfilling thing for me. It's been a strong sense of community that I think we've built over the past 3 to 4 years. It's something that really helps me decompress at the end of a tough week. And it's something that's allowed me to meet a lot of really great people that I would have never otherwise met if it hadn't been for, you know, this box of degeneracy that you guys are, you know, that I'm grateful enough to have you guys here with me tonight watching. How sad to lose the trust of your word. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, and, you know, with your flesh and blood, you unfortunately sometimes give them far too many chances. And then, you know, once it gets to a certain point, you just can't continue. It's just the definition of insanity. I should have listened to Bridget. I should have never opened that line of communication in 2020. Should have never done any of it. She was 100% right. And, you know, I've even, for some stupid reason, I've even thought about reconciling with him recently. And she's had to be like, no. She's like, you've already tried that. It doesn't work. He needs to be the one to do it. So, yeah, very thankful to have some sense when it comes to some of these decisions. And Bridget definitely provides that in my life. So your brother sounds a lot like Tommy Tallarico. I doubt your mother's proud of him, though. Well, the thing about that is, every single Mother's Day and every single time my mom's birthday comes around, he sends her a pity message, basically saying, you know, I'm so sad with how things have ended up with us. I'd love to start talking again. Completely forgetting the fact that you're the reason why the communication broke down. You're the reason why. It's like, you know, he would always phrase things as if it's so sad that this had to happen. Well, it didn't have to happen. You made the decision to put yourself, you know, in this role, and you decided to go for the throat. I mean, this is all your fault. What are you talking about? You're sorry for the way things have turned out. Take some responsibility. So, yeah, basically my friend Tusk had reached out to him to kind of have him explain himself about the whole, you know, rumor, allegation nonsense that he was doing toward my parents. And he basically tried to lecture Tusk, and he told him the thing that was like the straw that broke the camel's back was him telling Tusk, go have a think about how you're approaching this, and then we can talk. And basically Tusk exploded. He went in on him and was like, how fucking dare you try to turn it on me, this, that, or the other. And he alienated all the rest of the friend group too by doing that. So, you know, at a certain point, you've got to look into the mirror and realize that maybe I'm the problem. If you guys, you know, another example, not just the therapy thing that I was talking about, is we all have those friends who are just jumping from apartment to apartment to house, and they're just like, man, I just can't find good roommates. I don't know what the deal is. I just can't seem to find good roommates. Like, those people are never self-aware enough to realize you're the one hopping from different living space to different living space. Maybe you were the problem. It's always, oh, my roommates suck. They didn't do this, that, or the other. Well, but maybe it was you the whole time, and maybe you're just not willing to see that. Anyways, with that being said, a couple things I did want to talk about as well in this episode. I kind of wanted to talk about how the uploads are going to work and where I'm going to... I can't stop you from talking to him, but I know Bridget wouldn't steer you in the wrong direction. I know I'm always so much happier and alive feeling when I'm away from my mom. Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but, you know, I am a big advocate that if you need to cut someone out of your life, regardless of their blood or relationship to you, whatever it happens to be, even if it's a step brother, step sister, whatever it happens to be. If it needs to be done, it needs to be done. And I can tell you that I have absolutely been a much happier, more fulfilled person not having to worry about, his bullshit that's going on the daily and not having to be involved in that. So it's definitely been a big weight off of both of our shoulders. I can say that for sure. So with that being said, I have commissioned an artist that I met on Twitch. She's very cool. We're going to be working on some new logos for the show because I don't want to just talk about my own life. There's some other things that I'd like to talk about as well. For example, something that I kind of left out is the reason why I started skipping classes because of this one girl. We eventually started dating, and she just kept convincing me to skip classes. So, something that I kind of left out there, forgot to mention. But if anyone was wondering, like, why did I just stop going to classes? That's why. Just stupid 18, 19-year-old behavior. And don't recommend. But yeah, I mean, that kind of answers a lot of the questions that people have given me over the years, and something that I've kind of wanted to save for an episode like this. I want to talk about the focus of this show. So I do kind of want to have a loose lifestyle, not necessarily motivational speaking. I don't find myself to be an effective motivational speaker, although I know you can learn basically any one of those type of concepts. I really want this to be about other streamers. I want to have a lot of other streamers on here and just discuss, community building. I want to discuss, what streaming means to other people, kind of what it motivates them to go live as often as they do, what led them to streaming. If we can eventually, if I'm blessed enough to have, some Twitch partners or some people that are, much bigger than my channel, which there's a lot of people out there, I'd love to discuss that with them. I feel like those could be some very productive conversations. But yeah, I'm going to be not necessarily cutting this down. I'm basically just going to keep it just like it is. I'm going to be putting this up on my own YouTube channel, which is just Stampede_G with the Heather Mason profile picture. I'm just going to upload it as a podcast, which YouTube now lets you sort the uploads in podcasts. So we'll get all that set up. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the potential for a co-host down the line. I understand that doing it solo is a little bit awkward. Like I said at the beginning, it feels a little bit like a job interview. I mean, I'm just sat here, no music, lights on you, and you're just talking. Whether you guys have enjoyed it or not, I don't really know. I hope you have. Obviously, we're not completely done just yet. I just kind of wanted to talk about those few things, so I could get it out there and, kind of give this show a defined goal. Because I don't just want it to be about my own life. That was really just a topic for this episode. And yeah, I would love to talk about other guests about, what motivates them as far as content creation, what brought them here, what experience they kind of had in their life that brought them to the conclusion that streaming was for them. Like I said, if I'm lucky enough to hopefully get some partners that do this as a full-time job, I'd love to pick their brain and discuss those things as well. Now, something else that Dr. Red and a few other people in my community have asked me to talk about that I've never really gone too deep into is, relationships. I don't really want to go too deep into relationships because I feel like that, again, could be its own episode, could be its own chapter. But long story short is, I basically got all the mistakes in my life out of the way from ages 18 to 20. And so I am at that point now where I'm like, I'm too old for that shit. So I'm very, very happy to not have to be in the dating space. But I know that, trust me, there's enough podcast content out there to last you a lifetime about dating. So I really don't want to get into all that nonsense. Now, as far as another topic of discussion that we also kind of, I think I'd rather just talk about pho with Pinku Idol. Yes, I'd love to have she on here. She's already asked me if she would like to come on. Guests. So I don't want to have, the same set of guests just rotating frequently. I would like to try to get a big amount of different people on here. Now, I have some IRL friends that I'd love to get on here and discuss some different things. And kind of similar to the way that I talked about it, just kind of talk about their life and what they have going on with a focused, topic in mind. But something else that I wanted to talk about tonight, which we also kind of had discussed a few days ago. And, you know, again, going back to the logos, we've got a Nintendo version of this, which is going to be coming soon, which is the Nintendo seal of approval, but it'll be Stampede themed, where we're going to discuss different gaming topics. And the first topic I kind of want to discuss was the GTA 6 monetization. If anybody has heard of it or seen, there's basically a Take-Two representative, someone who's pretty high up in Take-Two, who is I believe it's the publisher of GTA. And they have been since at least GTA 5 came out. They have talked about radically restructuring the monetization plan for this game. And basically the outset, it looks like they're going to charge $70 for the standard version, which will give you baseline access to both the story and the online. And they also want to charge $120 for the deluxe edition, which I'm sure will have some, whatever their new version of Shark Cards is. If they keep that name, I really hope not, because Shark Card has a lot of negative connotation. And then the highest one they're going to be offering is either $200 to potentially $250, which is going to be the big collector's edition that's going to have statues of the main two characters and all these different things. But that's not the entire story. The other thing is, yes, the pay per hour rumor. There's a rumor that, and this is entirely a rumor because the person was basically just spitballing and saying, look, this game cost us 10 years of development time. It costs us over $2 billion. We think that we can restructure the way that we charge customers. And of course, they're already thinking in a live service way. They're already kind of getting, that mentality about how can we squeeze more money out of everybody? How can we turn them over and physically shake the nickels and dimes out of their pockets? And a strategy that they've already thought of is charging by the hour. Basically, in a similar fashion to the way that some MMO subscriptions work, like World of Warcraft, where you pay monthly, they're thinking about paying you by the hour, depending on how long you play. So basically, it's like pumping your fucking gas. It's like, oh, you played for 3 hours. That'll be X amount of money that you owe us. Now, there's obviously no guarantee that they would do that because I feel like the backlash would be immense. But the fact that they're even brainstorming and putting that type of shit out there is a big red flag to me. It says to me that they know, given this product, given the hype around it, given how much content is going to be created, they know that there are going to be whales out there that will spend astronomical amounts of money on this game. And I even saw comments on the article with people already saying, well, I'd be happy to pay $200. I'd be happy to pay $120 a year if that's what it takes. So basically people are offering to pay as much money as like an Adobe Premiere subscription just to have access to this game on a regular basis. Because again, it's not just a game. I mean, people have built their entire careers as content creators based on Grand Theft Auto 5. Whether it was through streaming, whether it was through YouTube, whatever it happens to be, GTA 5 literally made millionaires. And it did it frequently. If you guys weren't frequently on the internet for when GTA 5 dropped, that was unbelievable. There was a streamer, or a group of streamers that were just called Streamer House. And I don't even know if they still exist, but basically they knew someone or someone in that group had worked at GameStop and they basically broke the street date. But the embargo was only for the story. So as long as they didn't initiate any story missions, they were able to basically just drive around and do whatever they wanted to do. So they were the only stream on Twitch that was playing GTA 5 a whole last day before the game was set to release. And their stream, no lie, went up to 50,000 concurrent viewers at one point. The hype was unimaginable. And yeah, so they basically obtained partner status overnight, and Rockstar didn't do anything about it because, again, the embargo was strictly for the story mode. So they had found a loophole where as long as they didn't start a story mission, they weren't technically breaking anything. They weren't breaking the embargo, nothing. So when that game came out, if you were playing it, especially the day that online came out, your stream was going to get a significant bump in viewership. I saw so many people that I watched at that time get partner. It was just like a stimulus package of content creation whenever GTA 5 came out. Everybody and their brother, even people that strictly made content about fighting games. Like I remember Alex Valle playing it. tons of concurrent viewers, like over 3,000 concurrent viewers watching a guy who had made his name in the fighting game community play GTA 5. It was unbelievable how much this game did as far as spiking everybody's viewership and the community building and everything like that. So the fact that they've even been able to maintain relevancy until now is crazy. But that's also why I'm not surprised that they're re-examining how they can make even more money. Because of course, I mean, why wouldn't they do that? So we'll see what they end up going with. Now, the rumored release date of 2025, well, it's not rumored, it's in the trailer, but there's a high likelihood they won't be able to make that, and there's going to be a lot of delays. But the other thing you have to consider is that's not PC. PC hasn't even been mentioned in any of the promotional material, none of the trailers, nothing. This is console only. So we can assume PS5, Xbox Series X. I would be astounded if they have a PS4, Xbox One version of the game. I highly doubt that's going to happen. It's possible, but I highly doubt it. I think they're going to optimize it for PS5 and Series X, and that's going to be where you have to go to play it. And even with Red Dead 2, it took them several months to release Red Dead Online, and the way that GTA 5 was, it took a solid, I think, 2 or 3 months before online even launched, and so many people were trying to get on the servers to play online that it was basically broken on day one. There was no way for you to get on and just play without the whole thing crashing. Your character creator wouldn't go through. Yeah, and then on top of that, they had promised a heist mode online, and that didn't come for years. It took them years for some reason to optimize that and get it done. Wouldn't be surprised with their greed with how fast they abandoned Red Dead Online when it didn't make GTA Online money. Yeah, and the other crazy thing about that, did you know that PS4 is actually the most lucrative platform? There was a former Rockstar employee who worked there from 2018 to 2019. He said it might be different now, but when he worked there, PS4 actually had the most revenue per quarter when it came to shark card purchases and other microtransactions and different things like that. So maybe that's why they're leading off with console and they're not worried so much about PC, but I don't know, with the whole role-playing thing. I mean, roleplay was pretty late in GTA 5 as far as its popularity, but GTA 6, I would imagine the people working on those servers are going to be fucking ready to roll. The instant that online comes out, they're going to be fucking coding that shit like their life depends on it. So I would imagine we're going to have another 2013 type scenario whenever 6 launches where, you know, if someone manages to get a copy early or something, they're going to blow up. And yeah, get ready for that, because in 2013 it was one thing, but nowadays everything leaks. I mean, the trailer leaked. There's been a lot more leaks, like the Code Veronica, the Resident Evil Code Veronica remake leaks that just happened on 4chan a few days ago. Which, just to very briefly talk about that, someone who claims to be a Japanese quality assurance tester, QA tester, has said that they're basically going to release a demo soon that's going to be the intro section of Code Veronica, where Claire's running away from those soldiers and she gets trapped and all that stuff. That area is basically going to be the demo. But again, that's just a rumor. However, there have been a lot of rumors in the past that have turned out to be true. Perfect example of that is the Smash Ultimate final character release, where it turned out to be Sora, but someone actually went on 4chan and said, hey, I work for Disney. I work basically a desk job for Disney. We just took a phone call from Nintendo requesting some Disney music for a new trailer. Sora's the last character, because who else would it be? And it turned out to be Sora. So, you know, 4chan leaks are not always the most reliable thing, but they have been true in the past, and they don't exactly have the worst track record. So, you know, it's very likely that we could have a situation where, you know, that Code Veronica trailer or that Code Veronica demo comes out and it's exactly what was described. Leaks happen so early, games get review bombed years before they even come out. Absolutely. Now, there are people like Dust Golem who will basically just throw everything at the wall, and whatever sticks, they'll say, I'm the best, I predicted it. Like, for example, Dust Golem was basically going on and on and on about Silent Hill, new Silent Hill leaks, basically every year from 2015 until they finally did announce it in 2021, I believe. October 2021, I think, is when they announced it. Maybe 22. I think it was October 2022 that they announced the new games, but yeah, Dust Golem is that type. I appreciate that, Swix. 4chan Leaks got an honestly pretty solid track record. Yeah, that's the crazy thing because, 4chan, they can post it anonymously. Usually if it's a BS rumor, it's usually some gaming journalist on Twitter who claims to have, a very reliable source. They'll say, oh, I have a super reliable source, and they told me that this month is the month for the new Silent Hill leaks or the new Silent Hill announcements, and then that month would pass and nothing would happen, and they'd be like, well, they've been delayed and this, that, or the other. You guys remember when Dr. Disrespect got banned off of Twitch? And so many journalists, I'm not naming any names, but you guys know who I'm talking about. So many journalists were like, I know why he got banned, and he's done. He is finished. Well, how many years has it been? I'm checking the non-existent watch on my arm. How many years has it been now since that happened? 4, 5? And he still has not said why he was banned because no one has told him. I mean, at this point, like, they've gone through litigation, they've gone through all this legal dribble, all this nonsense, and even he still doesn't know why he was banned. So the only thing we can assume is it was either for repeated violations of TOS, like the whole, filming in a bathroom type thing that he did at TwitchCon. I think that also got him a ban. Or something contractual. And this is complete rumor, just allegations. I would just assume that it's something to do with his contract. Because, the rumor is that Mixer had existed at the time and they were trying to offer him a contract and Twitch kind of had to compete with Mixer's offer and something like that. So the best to my knowledge would be probably some legal nonsense having to do with his new contract at the time that they were just like, yeah, we're just not going to pay this. I love the modern day Nostradamus. Yeah, funniest people to laugh at when they make batshit crazy predictions. Yeah. Well, and the problem is we live in a world where the algorithm is going to boost you for frequently doing these things, which is one of the features I do like about Twitter now is the community notes section, which I can basically use as sort of a replacement for YouTube's dislike system, where if somebody posts some outrageous rumor, it's like, oh, confirmed that this game is coming out on this date. And then you see right in the community notes, no such thing has been confirmed. And you're like, well, no need to interact with that. I'll be on my merry little way and scroll right past that bullshit. So I will say community notes are cool in that sense. And then, have you guys noticed that a lot of the mobile games have been getting community noted as well? They'll all show you this really awesome trailer. It's, it's so polished and beautiful. And then the community notes will say, this does not reflect the real gameplay. And I'm like, oh, sweet. So I don't even have to bother with that bullshit. I wasn't going to download it anyway, but at least somebody's calling it out. So yeah, we'll see kind of what happens with that. Obviously, as far as gaming news, the Game Awards just happened. Baldur's Gate 3 won a shit ton of awards. It won Game of the Year. Not my type of game. Didn't intend to play it anyways, but I'm happy because what was a lot of the other games that people were expecting to win a lot of different things. I'm not a person who stays up to date on the biggest AAA releases that come out every year. I'm just kind of somebody that sticks to my own horror niche. So a lot of times I'm really not up to date on these things, and I don't know what the games are that are up for nomination or anything. But what I do know is I personally would trust Metacritic and Steam reviews and user reviews much more than any award ceremony nonsense, because just like the Oscars, just like the Golden Globes, just like whatever award ceremony you're watching from Hollywood, there's a small academy, as they call it, a small group of people that make all the decisions. Game Awards is something that is trying desperately to emulate Hollywood. That's why they had Timothy Chalamet or whatever as a host. Just like the Streamer Awards are desperate to emulate Hollywood, so are the Game Awards. They want red carpet events, they want big celebrity names, they want musical performances by big artists. They basically want to turn it into a video game version of the MTV VMAs is what they want it to be. Yeah. Well, Starfield and Fallout 4 won like virtually nothing. They were nominated for some stuff, but they didn't win anything, which is kind of sad, but kind of funny at the same time. Anyways. Yeah, so it's an award ceremony that desperately wants to emulate Hollywood. And it turns out that a lot of the people who actually make the decisions on which games win are good friends with Jeff Keighley, who's the guy who, is the primary MC, and he runs the whole event, So, of course, it's understandable that they would be. but that gives you a very limited set of opinions and views about what games actually deserve to be nominated, which games should win, that type of thing. So I honestly, it's a tough line to walk though, because imagine if they open it up to fan voting. You already know there'd be a whole community of people on 4chan or Reddit or whatever that would just try their damnedest to vote for the game that everybody knows is the worst so that they can skew the votes and ruin, So it's a tough line to walk. You really have to choose one or the other. But when it comes down to it, I just find it to be an incredibly, artificial, hey, we're desperately trying to emulate Hollywood in the video games industry. I mean, they talk about the voice actors like they're A-list celebrities and they have red carpet events and all this nonsense. It's just, I mean, come on. I'm on Twitch to avoid bullshit like that. I'm on Twitch and I primarily watch Twitch to avoid what I call legacy media. I really don't want to see something that's desperately trying to emulate that legacy media on Twitch or wherever it happens to be streamed. And I felt the exact same way about the streamer awards. I mean, who really gives a shit at the end of the day? Yeah, the bot votes would be terrible. The people forming entire communities to skew the vote toward easily the worst game. A lot of it would happen, and you know for a fact that that is the case. Yeah, and that's the other thing we need to consider is the Game Awards now has effectively replaced E3 because E3 no longer exists in its traditional form. So now that we no longer have E3, we really only have the Game Awards to look at in terms of an announcement show where they'll typically announce new releases and, new trailers, gameplay trailers, whatever it happens to be. So that is a positive that we do get some cool announcements, but I feel like it comes with so much baggage that it's just not personally something that I would want to participate in or watch. And basically in terms of video game news for the most part, I think, I think we were kind of discussing this the other day on the stream, but obviously I want to talk about this here as well. We were kind of talking about this live service direction that a lot of games are going into. A day before shuts down and gets Game of the Year same day. Oh no. Yeah, Game of the Year apparently, or the day before, which was a completely fake video game. I don't know if it was a money laundering scheme or what it was, but basically it came out, it was horrendous. It was nothing like the original trailers promised, and I think it actually got removed from Steam if I remember right, but I don't know for sure. But kind of speaking on the same thing as Grand Theft Auto 6, we have all these games now that are moving into a live service direction, meaning they want you to consistently pay for the game through and through. They want to release new content for it, new seasonal updates. They want to release this, that, or the other update for it, and they want you to pay every single time. And one of the worst examples of it right now is Overwatch 2. In Overwatch 1, you basically paid $40 to get in the door. $40 got you the standard copy, $60 got you like the special edition, and you got the skins, the special Soldier 76 and Tracer skins and all that, the Widow skin. And then as a new character would come out, they would put it on the PTR, the playable test, environment, and then they would just release it for free update. Everybody gets a free new character. Nobody has to purchase it. Well, in Overwatch 2, they decided, let's make the game free to play, but let's charge for a season pass every time a new character comes out. So you basically either have to spend a gargantuan amount of in-game currency or spend your own hard-earned money every time a new character comes out, which, of course, is going to end with everybody spending astronomically more than they used to. But for me, it just made me check out completely because it's obvious what they're trying to do, and I'm not going to participate in that nonsense. I'm not going to continue paying every single time a new character comes out. I feel like the monetization strategy they had with the first game was far superior, and they were trying to change and fix what wasn't broken. Dead by Daylight is bad too. Absolutely, yeah. Dead by Daylight wants you to pay every single time a new killer is released. Like, why can't there just be a free update? Why can't you do a free weekend like Overwatch used to do? When a new character would get released, they would do a free weekend so everybody could jump back on the game and try the new character. That type of thing. Oh yeah, Overwatch is definitely way past its prime. You guys remember when Overwatch League was being pitched as like esports' answer to the NBA or the MLB? And they had like Robert Kraft owns an Overwatch League team. The guy who owns the fucking New England Patriots owns an Overwatch League team called the Boston Uprising. And Overwatch League is basically gone. It's disintegrated. I mean, it's a shell of its former self at this point. The inaugural season did pretty well, viewership-wise, and then the meta of the game changed so that everybody wanted to play 3 tanks and 3 healers, and nobody wanted to watch that bullshit because nobody was playing the fun characters. Nobody was playing Tracer. Nobody was playing the Cowboy, Cole Cassidy. Nobody was playing Genji. Nobody was playing these fun characters. There were just 3 tanks, 3 supports. And everybody was doing the exact same strategy because that was the optimal strategy. So in an attempt to fix it, they introduced a role lock where you had to select 2 damage characters, 2 tanks, and 2 supports. But it was too little too late. They had basically let a whole season worth of viewership just disappear, and they lost their contract with Twitch. So they moved over to YouTube Gaming, and literally nobody knew where the streams were at that point because it just disappeared. I'm just mad that whenever I quit a game, it becomes a live service free to play and I spent $40 for nothing. Absolutely. You know, Team Fortress 2 went free to play. I think CSGO eventually went free to play. I don't know if CS2 is free to play, but yeah. And basically, one of the biggest offenders that I personally remember was the first Star Wars Battlefront, the EA Star Wars Battlefront, meaning the newer ones. And whenever that game came out, they had the ability to get this in-game currency and unlock Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, the characters they know everybody wants to play as these characters. Why the fuck wouldn't you want to play as them? So they set them to such an absurdly high amount that you would literally need to play for months to be able to afford it in-game. You would need to play for months, grinding all day, every day. Or you can put down some of your hard-earned money and you can just buy them. So after being criticized for the absurdity of how expensive the in-game currency made that, they decided to make a Reddit post. And I feel so bad for the person who was tasked with making this Reddit post because they knew they were going to get demolished. And they said the intent was to create a sense of accomplishment when you finally get these characters. And it became almost overnight the most downvoted Reddit post of all time. Of all time. That's how pissed off people were about this. The amount of revenue EA lost at that period of time was so bad that someone very high up, a very high up executive at Disney, was contacting a very high up executive at EA saying, hey, we will pull the license if this keeps up. It was that bad. And of course, you know, I can't remember if it was Battlefront 1 or 2. Of course, when the holidays rolled around, they released the holiday fucking emotes. They wanted to charge like $5 for a fucking thumbs up on screen. It's like, that's not worth $5 fucking dollars. What's up, Salt? That's not worth $5. Yeah, the amount of grinding in-game just to unlock one of those 2 characters was such an absurdly high number that it would take months and months and months to get something like that. And it's obvious what they want to do. It's like most people, the primary market, primary audience for these games is ages 16 to 30. Okay. Even at 16, some people are starting to get like their first fast food job or maybe like a cart pusher type job at a local grocery store. Like even at 16, people are starting to get out into the workforce. Who has time to grind away 6 to 7 months of their time to unlock one video game character? Like in 7 or 8 months, the way EA works, they're already going to be announcing Battlefront 2. And that's kind of what they did. Didn't they release Battlefront 2 like the year after Battlefront 1 or maybe 2 years after? And EA is the worst offender by far because they've also got the FIFA packs. The FIFA packs are the biggest example of gambling. And I showed this the other day because NBA 2K is also very disgusting in its gambling setup. They had a 2K20 My Team trailer where they essentially paid some YouTube creators to show up to this set and pretend to play roulette, to play pachinko, to open up card packs, and just pretend like they were having the time of their life. They were having so much fun doing this shit. And when they released the trailer, it was dislike bombed into oblivion. It was dislike bombed into fucking oblivion because everybody said, what is this? Is this a basketball game or is this a fucking casino simulator? What is this? So they quickly pulled the video, but they left the UK version up. So everybody started flocking to the UK version, dislike bombing that. Well, the game comes out and it's exactly as advertised. It's a casino simulator. You spend a shit ton of money to open these packs. There's all these evolutions and nonsense like that. Well, it's only gotten worse to my knowledge every single year that an NBA 2K comes out. So we kind of had talked about this the other day on my stream, but again, I'm mentioning it here again for the podcast for the sake of, having all this in one spot. There was actually a meeting with the UK Parliament in which EA sent a representative, and this lady was completely lost. She looked like the lost kid in Walmart who had wandering through the aisles. I mean, she didn't know where she was, could barely get a sentence out because you knew that there were all these legal people from EA in her ear, like, don't say this, don't say that, don't say this, don't admit to this. And so basically they ask her, do you think that the loot box system has been implemented in an ethical way? And the first thing she says is, well, first of all, we don't call them loot boxes. Yes, you do. When I launch your video game and I go to these certain sections and I go to these games, it literally says loot box. So first of all, fuck right out of here with that. But then she goes on to liken them to surprise mechanics. She says, we use the internal language of surprise mechanics. And if you go to any local toy store, you'll find that people love them, and she used examples like Hatchimals and LOL Surprise and all these different things. She's like, people love surprise mechanics. And you'll find that, people love to enjoy surprise mechanics in very ethical and fun ways. And we feel that with our FIFA packs, we've done that. And so the guy jumps on it and he goes, okay, so you say that about the FIFA packs, but what about other games? What about other things that you've implemented? And she just says, yeah, if you were to talk about our whole catalog, anything called loot boxes, I feel is implemented in an ethical way. It's like, well, you know what? That settles it. Case closed. This is ethical. Everyone complaining about it is completely wrong. Well, that didn't go over very well. And so, how do we combat this strategy of turning these games into slot machines, roulette wheels, situations where the developers can go in? And another example was Destiny 2. Destiny 2, the developers literally went in and tweaked the chances of certain drops occurring. So the system is rigged. How can you play a game that's going to have random drops of anything where the developers can go in and tweak the rate at which those items drop whenever they feel like it? If people are getting too many of the valuable items, they'll just go in and tweak it and reduce your ability to get said items. I mean, this is such a disgusting overreach from the developers. You need to stick to a drop rate and leave it. Decide on one and leave it, because once you start manipulating that, you're basically the house at a fucking casino. That's what it comes down to. You are the house. And the house always wins. That phrase exists for a reason. So how do we combat this? Well, in Europe, I believe, if my information is correct, and it may not be, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comments or in chat. But I believe they are working toward banning it outright. Any sort of loot box, whatever surprise mechanic, whatever the fuck you want to refer to it to, I believe they're working to outright ban it if it hasn't happened already. And if that does take place, then that is going to be a pretty grim look for the US market. Now, the US market and the European market make up the majority of the income, but I did look up the statistics on it, and the microtransaction revenue alone is somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 billion. In 2023 alone, the microtransaction revenue in video games was a $60 billion industry. I don't know if that's worldwide or just the US, but that is such an astronomically high amount of money that they are going to fight tooth and nail. These developers, these publishers are going to fight tooth and nail to find every loophole. They're going to hire every person who's an expert in legalese. They're going to find every loophole imaginable. And they are going to continue to put in these random, pack mechanics. They're going to continue to put in these loot boxes. And the only thing that can stop it is an outright ban, in my opinion. Now, I understand that's much easier said than done. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of different things that would have to go correctly in order for us to be able to ban this. And also this would force, and even if it were to happen, the developers and the publishers would just say, well, what is the next way that we can milk these people for their money? They're just going to move the goalpost. Just because they don't have loot boxes at their disposal, they'll find something else. That's the way this corporate ass industry works. They aren't microtransactions, they're just transactions. Yeah, absolutely. Microtransactions to me is like $2 or $3 for a skin. But these aren't microtransactions. These are $20, $25, $30 for in-game items. Like the Overwatch battle passes are always $20 to $30 fucking dollars. Every single time a new character comes out, $20 to $30 every single time. No. You want additional money from me, then provide me with more than just a new character and like one skin for that character. Provide me like a big chunk of new, completely fresh, brand new content for this game. Meaningful, worthwhile DLC would be the only thing I would pay that type of money for. And if you can't provide that, good example would be Witcher 3 had some awesome DLC. If you can't provide that, well, you're not entitled to my money. Go fuck yourself. Yeah, they charge $20 for the color blue. They want, $25, $30 for the battle pass. You always got to, the seasonal battle pass, whatever the hell it is. I tell this story all the time. Whenever I was playing Call of Duty Black Ops 4, which is the last Black Ops and last Call of Duty that I ever played, to be honest with you, there was a sniper rifle called the Valkyrie, which was a version of the 50 caliber, where it looked like, it had wings and it just was this awesome, Valhalla Valkyrie looking sniper rifle. And it was $14.99 or $9.99, I forget. It was $10 or more for this thing. So I put down the $10 and I'm like, sweet, I got it. Well, I didn't get it. What I did was I unlocked a new battle pass that once completed, then I would get it. And to complete all the challenges to unlock the sniper was going to take a solid 7 to 8 hours, and it was timed. So you only had a limited amount of time to complete this new battle pass. And if you spent the money and didn't complete it, well, you just didn't get it. So you literally just threw money. You might as well just burn the money or thrown it into the toilet and flushed it down the fucking toilet, because it was a complete waste of your time and everybody's time. Yeah, they are literally getting to the point where they're so greedy about this, they're charging you for the privilege of being allowed to grind on their game. And it's so prevalent in the industry that even Rocksteady is doing it now. Have you guys seen the new Suicide Squad game, I believe it's called, where it's literally just a looter shooter? They've already shown that there's going to be loot boxes. They've already shown epic skins and epic guns and rarities and, all this different stuff. Well, recently they released a trailer where they tried to put all that under wraps. And the whole time in the trailer, they're talking about, well, here at Rocksteady, we focus on storytelling and this, that, or the other. They tried their best to not mention the fact that when you pull down the curtain, you pull the curtains aside, the only thing that's there is a looter shooter live service pile of shit. That's all it is. So you have to be able to look past the marketing and all the promotional videos. You have to wade through the bullshit and find that this game is just another one of many. It's trying to be another Fortnite. It's trying to be another, there's a million of them out. It's trying to be another Apex Legends. It's trying to, most likely free to play, but I don't know for sure, but it's going to be another looter shooter with rarities and bullshit. It's just, I don't see it succeeding. And I think it could be kind of the swan song for Rocksteady, unfortunately, who has made some great games in the past, but how are they going to reconcile putting out such a disgustingly monetized game unless they just absolutely knock it out of the park? And maybe it does have a great story. Maybe that could save it, but I don't know. I just feel like people are so fed up with live service games that I don't know if they'll put up with this. I really don't. Yeah, if the loot drops are in-game, see, here's the way it used to work. You would play a game like Final Fantasy XI. I realize we're going back like ancient history in terms of gaming. We're going back to 2004. You would get a rare item from killing a particular enemy, and then you would go sell it on the in-game market. Well, basically, some people would camp, and there were also bots in the game, but they would go camp these particular enemies that would drop these things. But this was all in game. You didn't have to pay extra. It wasn't something where, oh, you got to pay $10 before this enemy will drop this item. It just is there. And if you're lucky enough to get the item, it's a completely random drop. Then you just made a ton of in-game money because you can go sell it at the market, what have you. I feel like that's a genuinely rewarding system because, yeah, it's luck-based, but it encourages you to just play the fucking game the way that it's intended to be played. And sometimes you'll get lucky and get these amazing drops, whereas just paying for it is like, I don't know, it just takes the fun out of it. It's like, cool, I dropped $20 and I got this really valuable item. Who gives a shit? You paid for it. You didn't earn that. It doesn't even feel rewarding to just put down $20. I wasted money on that. Yeah, exactly. Like Final Fantasy XI, another example. I've watched a lot of videos about people that were super addicted to that in the past, and there were basically these bracelets that you needed that would give you dexterity or something like that. And if you were lucky enough to have those, you were like kitted out. But everybody would camp this one particular enemy to try to get these things. Like, that sounds fun. That's genuinely like a fun thing to do in an MMO. At least it sounds like it to me. You know, remember, and pre-ordering is another thing that drives me absolutely nuts. Now, I will say pre-ordering has gotten better in the past few years. In the 2010s, especially, like when the Xbox One and the PS4 had first come out, it was really egregious and really disgusting because there would be entire modes that would be completely inaccessible by people who did not pre-order the game. And the perfect example of this was Dying Light. There was a mode called Be the Zombie mode in Dying Light, right? And if you didn't pre-order the game, you legit did not have access to that on day one. I thought that was really disgusting. So you're going to force me to risk a $60 investment on something I have never played before in my life. It's a brand new IP. And that's the only way I get this mode? Fuck yourself. Now, like I said, it's gotten better in recent years because most of the times now, companies will just release a deluxe edition. And that's where you'll get the additional weapons and the potentially, you know, the DLC, season pass or whatever. You just put down 70 or 80 bucks and you just get it. Pre-ordering is not a huge thing anymore because physical copies are kind of, you know, they're not as sought after. Most people just download digitally, and that's fair. But speaking of downloading digitally, and kind of a way to pivot off of that conversation, some of the digital content is disappearing now. So I saw a photo the other day that's kind of going viral right now about Sony. Basically, their contract with Discovery is ending, to my knowledge. And they're letting everybody know that, hey, if you have Discovery content on your PlayStation console, it'll no longer be accessible after December of this year. Straight up, your access will be revoked. So even if you paid full price for this content 10 plus years ago, you don't have it anymore. And I have my own personal experience with this too, because roast me all you want, everybody, I'm a big fan of the Devil May Cry reboot from 2013. And I bought that game on PS3 brand new digitally when it first came out in early 2012 or early 2013. I forget exactly when it came out, but anyways, recently, I was like, oh, I had like 100% completion file on that game. I kind of want to go back and see if it's as good as I remember because I liked it. And I go to the game and I go to launch it and it says the time limit for this content has expired. I'm like, what the, do I need to go re-download it again? Do I need to reactivate my console? No, it turns out 8 years after the game was released, so in 2021, Sony decided to completely pull that game. And if you downloaded it, even if you paid full price like I did, you can no longer play that game until you purchase a physical copy and put it in your PS3. So this was a big concern whenever the Xbox One came out. Everybody was going to Microsoft, like, what happens when those servers are down and there's no way to play these games anymore? And their response was basically, oh, everybody needs to relax. This generation hasn't even started yet. This isn't a big deal. It's like, well, it's gonna be. So address it now. And now here we are, we're in the middle of it. And the thing that everybody was so concerned about 10 fucking years ago, when the Xbox One and the PS4 had just been announced, where our access to things that we paid full price for are disappearing before our very fucking eyes, and there's nothing we as consumers can do about it. 100% agreed. Salt says this is why piracy is important. Pirates are the only people who actually care about conservation. And what happens when the patches are no longer available? There's games like Assassin's Creed Unity. There's a few other Assassin's Creed games, but there's a lot of glitchy as fuck, buggy as hell games that came out on PS3, 360, those servers are going to be up forever? Absolutely not. When Microsoft, when Sony, when all these other companies decide that it's no longer lucrative to keep these update servers running, they will be gone. And how many people realistically have all these things downloaded? Is there even a library of game patches that you can find out there? Some of these games are outright broken, and they need the patch to be functional. What happens when that server is gone and there's no more update to download? Where are you going to get it from? Is your game just functionally broken now? Because these companies have adopted a ship it and patch it later mentality? We're the ones who have to suffer for that? If I put in a Super Nintendo game, if I put in a PS2 or an Xbox game into my consoles now, they're done. Yeah, the development cycles were hellish and they had to spend a lot of time away from their families, but when that shit was ready to ship, it was 5-star gold, done. Bug tested, QA tested to oblivion, done. But nowadays, like I said, these companies have adopted a fuck it, just ship it out and we'll just patch it later. And so now we have a situation where a few years down the line, we can pop a game into our systems and there just won't be any updates available because those servers are down now. It's no longer lucrative for these companies to keep them up. Yeah, and backwards compatibility is another issue. Microsoft is making strides, but that's still a curated list. You can't just put any Xbox game into a Series X or whatever and have it be upscaled. There's only a selected number of games that are going to work. There's licenses that have to be kept up to date. Sometimes distributors don't want their games upscaled. There's a lot of issues with that. 100%, Kendo, they're letting the consumer be the beta testers. Exactly. A lot of content gets removed, a lot of things get added, and games are so altered from the state that they originally released in, and you can't even access them anymore. It's disgusting. And, this was a conversation that so many people were having back in 2013 because the original pitch of the Xbox One was always online, checking in once every 24 hours. If you don't have access to the internet, you can't even play a single player game offline. That's what they were going with. They wanted a service-based system where all the games were digital to the best of their ability. They wanted to eliminate the physical used game market. And now we're kind of seeing the things that people were so fearful about playing out, and nobody seems to give a shit. It's like, whatever. But the discovery thing seemingly woke people up to like, damn, I'm actually going to lose like all the content I bought digitally 10 years ago, and there's nothing you can do about it. What are you going to do about it? That's another reason why live service games suck, because they can just shut them down. Exactly. What if the game's not lucrative enough? If they can't keep the doors open, for example, this Suicide Squad game will be no more. If they can't keep their doors open, if they can't keep the lights on, these servers running, this game will cease to exist, and all the money you've spent in it is completely vanished into the ether. There's been a lot of games that you can spend a lot of money on that either the player base has disappeared or it wasn't financially viable for the studio to keep it running. And so they've just completely given up. Fuck all the money you spent on it. There is no more support for this game. It's gone, it's finished, and there's nothing you can do about it. I don't know. I just know that Anthem failed very miserably. And it basically was the death rattle of BioWare, unfortunately. And don't tell me about the company that released Mass Effect Andromeda, because that was certainly not BioWare. That was some company that had done like the multiplayer of Mass Effect 3, and that's it. So, we can hope that these things improve. But for the time being, we're in kind of a rough spot. We don't really know what these companies are going to do as far as their solutions to our digital content expiring. We don't know if they're going to try to compensate us in other ways. The PS3 store itself is going to be disappearing sometime soon. And they even tried to do it a few years ago until there was a massive backlash and they decided, oh shit, I guess we'll leave it up for a little bit longer. So, it's tough to say how they're gonna approach this. I don't know how Sony's gonna approach it. I don't know how Microsoft will. Nintendo, they have also really started to digitize a lot of their older games and release them. This is why they've gone so hard at different sites that host ROMs. I forget which one it was, if it was SNESO-ROM or a Cool ROM, but basically they raided the person's house who was running the server for the website. Because they're so adamant that they don't want people downloading ROMs, they don't want people emulating their games, because they want to monetize that and sell it to you as a virtual console or Classic, whatever they're calling it. So Nintendo's moving in that direction. Sony has already been there for well over 10 years. Microsoft has been there for 10 years. Basically, ever since they decided to start digitally allowing you to download full copies of games, that content, regardless of whether they tell you or not, it has an expiration date and it's fast approaching. You know, whether it's 10 years, whether it's 15 years, there will come a day where you cannot access a large portion of your digital library and all that money is just gone. So, you know, that's the, to end on a high note, that's the grim reality of the gaming industry we live in today. But, like I said, we'll have to see kind of what their solutions end up being on that. GOG is cool because GOG offers, you know, a way to access some older games, but of course you got to repurchase those, and sometimes they're not very cheap. So, you know, having a service like that is great, but, you know, there's no guarantee that the game you need is going to be there. So, well, with that being said, I wanted to just kind of open it up for one last round of questions here. If you guys had anything you wanted to ask me about any of the topics we talked about today, go ahead and ask away and we'll cover that, and we'll go ahead and get wrapped up here. GOG at least does DRM free. Exactly. DRM is the big problem. A couple of people said they had some questions they were going to wait for the end. So if you guys want to go ahead and ask me that, feel free. But yeah, overall, I feel like, you know, as far as a comprehensive overview for episode 1, I'm really happy with how this went. I am going to be creating an account for, you know, just uploading these as audio only to Apple and also Spotify, basically wherever, you know, the big services are for people to listen to podcasts in case anybody actually wants to hear this. I'll put it there. That way, if people want to listen in the car or whatever, they can do that. I'm just going to stream it until it dies. And when it does, I shall go down with it. Oh, use Steam until it dies. Yeah. Steam, that's going to be a big one too, because Valve might have billions of dollars in revenue, but how long realistically are they going to be able to keep Steam up? We don't know. And you know, there have been games that have been pulled off of Steam before. Alice Madness Returns is an example. That game got straight up pulled off of Steam because EA now offers it and the Epic Game Store exists. Let's see. Okay, so it's back on Steam now, but there was a period of time where it was actually removed entirely off of Steam. Cryostasis, Steam won't be around for long. Yeah, now we have this fragmentation going on PC, like you guys are mentioning. We've got Steam, we've got the Epic Game Store, we've got fucking GOG, we've got Gemly. Does Gemly still exist? We've got Uplay from Ubisoft. So we have all this fragmentation going on. Every one of these services wants, you know, except for Steam and Epic Game Store, they want like these monthly subscriptions to Uplay Plus or whatever. Oh, Cryostasis is no longer on Steam, yeah. Yeah, every game company wants its own store. Well, it's the same thing as video streaming services. You know, there's so much fragmentation now that if you're paying for 3 or 4, if you're paying for Hulu, you're paying for Netflix, you're paying for Amazon Instant, you're paying for all these different things, the cost of all these services compounded is way more than people used to pay for cable, which was the reason they got away from cable in the first place, was because it was cheaper to, you know, put down $8.99 or like $7.99 in the beginning for a Netflix sub. And you basically didn't need TV anymore because they had so much available at the time. TV shows, movies, everything, docuseries, whatever it happened to be, they had it. And now all these companies are just pulling their shit off of other platforms and putting it on their own platform and forcing us to pay 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different subscriptions if we want to access that content. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and conclude that here for episode 1. I hope you guys enjoyed. We're going to be delving a little bit deeper into some of those topics and hopefully having some guests on episode 2. I'm going to be releasing one of these every Wednesday night at around 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be recording these live. So if you want to check these out, I'll be streaming it at twitch.tv/stampede_G. But yeah, that concludes episode 1 of Stamp of Approval. Stay tuned next Wednesday for episode 2. Goodbye.